The crying baby. For weeks, Sarah had been hearing it, the soft, plaintive cries of a baby in the dead of night. It began shortly after she and her husband, Mark, moved into their new house. Nestled in a quiet, suburban neighborhood, the house seemed perfect, charming, spacious, and serene. But the tranquility was shattered by the eerie, ghostly cries that drifted through the halls, chilling Sarah to her core. It always happened around 2 a.m., right when the house was at its quietest. The first time she heard it, she thought it was a figment of her imagination, a trick played by the creaky house settling into its foundation. But as the nights wore on, the cries became a regular, unsettling routine. The sound would start faintly, like a distant echo, and then grow louder, more insistent. It was a heart-wrenching cry, one that would pierce the stillness of the night and send shivers down her spine. Sarah would get out of bed, heart pounding, and search the house from top to bottom, but every time, she found nothing, no baby, no sign of any disturbance, just an empty house and a gnawing sense of dread. Mark, initially dismissive, started to worry about Sarah's well-being as the cries continued. He suggested it might be a neighbor's child or just a noise from the old house. But Sarah knew it was something more. The cries seemed to be coming from within the walls, a haunting, ghostly lament that defied explanation. One particularly cold night in November, the cries grew more intense, more desperate. Sarah couldn't take it anymore. She decided to investigate the source of the noise, determined to uncover whatever was tormenting her. She waited until the crying reached its peak, then followed the sound through the darkened rooms. She traced the cries to the basement, a dark, foreboding place she had avoided since moving in. The basement was old and musty, with cobwebs hanging from the ceiling and a single flickering light bulb that cast eerie shadows on the walls. Sarah's footsteps echoed as she descended the creaky wooden stairs, each step amplifying her growing fear. The crying grew louder as she approached the far corner of the basement. The noise seemed to emanate from behind a large, wooden cabinet that was pushed against the wall. Sarah's hands trembled as she reached out, trying to move the cabinet, but it was heavy and immovable. She hesitated, her breath visible in the cold air, and then decided to investigate further. With a crowbar she found in the corner, she pried open a small, dusty door hidden behind the cabinet. The door creaked open to reveal a narrow, dimly lit passageway. The cries were now almost deafening, reverberating off the stone walls. Sarah's heart raced as she ventured into the passageway, the darkness swallowing her whole. The passage led to a small, hidden room that had clearly been sealed off for years. The room was filled with old, dusty furniture, covered in sheets, and a few forgotten trinkets. But what caught Sarah's eye was a large, ornate crib sitting in the center of the room. The crib was antique, with intricate carvings and a canopy that was now draped in tattered, yellowed fabric. The crying was coming from the crib, the sound muffled but unmistakable. Sarah approached it, her hands shaking as she pulled back the canopy. Inside the crib was a doll, an old-fashioned porcelain doll with delicate features and a soft, embroidered dress. Its eyes were wide and glassy, staring blankly at Sarah. The crying sound, she realized with horror, was coming from the doll. It wasn't a real baby, but the sound was disturbingly lifelike. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she looked closer. The doll's mouth was moving, producing the eerie cries that had haunted her for weeks. She reached out to touch it, and as her fingers brushed against its porcelain cheek, a cold shiver ran down her spine. Suddenly, the room was filled with an icy draft, and the cries grew louder, more frantic. The lights flickered violently, casting erratic shadows on the walls. Sarah stumbled backward, her heart pounding as she tried to make sense of what was happening. The doll's eyes seemed to follow her every movement, its gaze fixed and unblinking. The cries reached a crescendo, filling the small room with a relentless, heartbreaking wail. Sarah's fear escalated, and she felt a presence behind her, a cold, malevolent force that seemed to seep from the very walls. In a frantic attempt to escape, Sarah turned and fled from the room, racing up the stairs and out of the basement. She slammed the basement door shut and leaned against it, gasping for breath. The cries continued to echo in her mind, a haunting reminder of the horror she had just witnessed. Desperate for answers, Sarah researched the history of the house. She discovered that the previous owner, an elderly woman named Agnes, had lived alone for decades. Agnes had been known to collect antique dolls and was rumored to have been involved in some sort of dark rituals. The locals whispered about a tragic event that had occurred in the house many years ago. A child had died under mysterious circumstances, and Agnes had reportedly never been the same. The discovery only deepened Sarah's fear. She couldn't shake the feeling that the cries were not just a haunting but a cry for help, a remnant of a past tragedy that refused to be forgotten. The doll, with its unnerving lifelike cries, was a vessel for the sorrow and despair that had once pervaded the house. Determined to rid herself of the torment, Sarah decided to get rid of the doll. She packed it carefully and took it to a local antique shop, hoping to leave it behind forever. The shop owner, an old man with a knowing look, accepted the doll without question but warned Sarah that some things were better left undisturbed. That night, as Sarah lay in bed, she hoped the cries would finally cease. But as the clock struck 2 a.m., the crying began again, louder and more desperate than before. It wasn't just coming from the house, but from the street outside, from every corner of her world. The cries filled her ears, her mind, a relentless, haunting echo that refused to be silenced. Sarah's sanity began to fray as the cries persisted, a constant reminder of the nightmare she had uncovered. She tried to leave, to escape the house and its dark history, but the cries followed her, an inescapable presence that haunted her every waking moment. In the end, Sarah was never seen again. The house remained empty, a chilling reminder of the terror that had once dwelled within its walls. The basement door was found locked, and the hidden room was never opened again. The doll was never found, and the cries eventually faded, but the legend of the haunted house and the mysterious cries of the lost baby became a local tale, a story told in hushed whispers, a chilling reminder of the darkness that sometimes lurks in the most unexpected places. And if you listen closely on a rainy night, when the world is quiet and still, you might just hear it, the soft, plaintive cries of a baby, drifting on the wind, a ghostly reminder of the house's dark past and the horror that lies within.